everybody. It's Friday. Are we even paying attention to what day of the week it is, or how do we keep track? Whatever day this is to you, if it's the beginning of your week, the end of your week, the middle of your week, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here with us tonight. I have a lot of great news to share with you. It doesn't always go unequivocally positive, but this week has been a pretty good one on the Sarah 2020 campaign trail. I want to thank our producers who've put together this fantastic interface so that we can have ASL interpretation. So thanks to our interpreters who are here tonight. And it means we can also have guests on our show. Who knew when we started this campaign that we would be entering into a multimedia universe? But thanks to the shelter in place orders and the COVID pandemic, that's where we are as we campaign. There's news about it a lot. And I just wanted to let you know that this campaign is actually doing as well as could be expected in this time. There's so much activity. Many of you probably got your voter pamphlet statements. I know I got mine. That may be a uniquely Oregonian thrill when that shows up in the mailbox. My daughter and I sat and went through it page by page yesterday at the dinner table, playing games. Maybe you guys do voter pamphlet bingo at your house or have voting parties, but I love the fact that Oregon has the voter pamphlet. I'm so grateful to vote by mail. I am so grateful that this year there's paid postage on our vote by mail. So it's really going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to get out the vote this election season. There's so many exciting things happening. And this live stream tonight is going to focus a lot on good government and healthy democracy, because there was a lot of that in the news this week. But I want to point you toward a couple of things. In addition to voters pamphlets dropping, the League of Women Voters, I want to give them a shout out. Year after year, they are focused on things that make Portland more livable and more equitable. So they always make sure they have their own voter pamphlet, which we are in. And they did a video voter guide since they weren't able to host debates. And so you can take a look at the League of Women Voters for Oregon website. We'll throw the links up in our communications and on our social media so you can find them. But there are some video voter guides there so you can learn about candidates. A lot of organizations too are doing questionnaires. And so as you encounter organizations, one that I really like is the East Portland Action Plan. You know, I'm very fond of East Portland and live adjacent to it, and in recent years had been residing in East Portland. So I'm excited about all the things happening in East Portland. So the East Portland Action Plan has issued their questionnaire, and we'll have questionnaires coming out about parking reform and police reform and housing affordability and infill and all sorts of things like that. And I would encourage you too to pay attention to which candidates actually take the time to fill out these questionnaires or not. Some campaigns like mine focus on community-based organizations as the premise of our success. And so we take an extra effort to make sure that those questionnaires are always filled out. Other candidates don't always take such care. So I think that says something right there about what people value in terms of how they mean to engage with the community and how they communicate with the community. Another thing we were excited about was we had a full page ad in the Willamette Week this week. So if you're out walking in your neighborhood and you see a Willamette Week box, grab one of their print editions. There's a nice letter to Portland that my team and I were able to put together because we've been thinking carefully about this crisis. And I know so many of you are having a hard time financially, mentally. It can be challenging. There's a lot of stress in the uncertainty. I know we've been having it in our house about how do you plan for a future when there's so much uncertainty. There's anxiety even in the moment about, are we going to stay in shelter in place, or will that be lifted, and how will we know? And when you have the president of your country telling people to ingest disinfectants and bleach as a cure, you know, it can be hard to wade through the information and even know what you can depend on. So thinking about the fact that I know there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, but there are some things that we can do to get through this together. That's how I think we really start to make progress through the pandemic. We have to maintain a sense of optimism. We have to maintain a sense of connectedness, right? Staying really connected to each other. We have to focus on making sure each Portlander's basic needs are being met for food, for water, uh, for care, for shelter. And it really brings us back to the basics of what's important and what do we focus on with each other. So if you walk past the blue Willamette Week box, please grab one of those and read that letter. And I hope it uplifts you and gives you something to look forward to as we head into the May 19th, 2020 primary. I've got some updates for you from my field team. We are going full swing. I know it seems weird that we're not out knocking on doors, and leaving those little cards in your screen door this election cycle. Maybe some of you are happy about that. I know I'm sometimes a little taken aback when my doorbell rings at 7 o'clock at night. But for those of you who that's something you're used to, we're doing something different now. It's called distributed organizing. And our field team is working with people on the phones, they're texting, they're having everybody reach out. And more than ever, this is what we need you to do between now and May if this campaign is something that's important to you. There are still many undecided voters in this race. And if we're going to unseat the incumbent and really get that city hall back focused on the needs of everyday Portlanders, we need everyday Portlanders working those phones, calling their friends, sending text messages, and making sure that we're getting people to vote Sarah when that ballot drops. Probably about next week. Those ballots will start arriving in people's mailboxes, and there'll be a steady trickle after that. You can go to sarah2020.com to volunteer. There are plenty of opportunities for you there, and our team is very helpful. They're sweet and kind people, and it's a wonderful chance for you to. So many people are actually home now and answering the phones, which is not something we're accustomed to in campaigns. Usually you get a lot of straight to voicemails, but so many people are home, and many, especially our elders, are lonely. So we're having wonderful phone calls with our neighbors here in Portland, and it's wonderful to talk with them about what's going on for them, how we can be helpful. I even got to celebrate a birthday with one person who was all alone and having their birthday. And so we got to say happy birthday to a Portlander who otherwise maybe wouldn't have gotten a birthday call that day. So I encourage you to sign up and volunteer, connect with your neighbors while you're doing something good politically. Another important update. This is a big one. The matching period. So that amazing public campaign finance program that has allowed this campaign to function without taking corporate donations, without taking money from special interests or lobbyists, without taking checks that are $5,000 and $10,000 that really shape for whom you pick up the phone when times get tough. We have been able to run this campaign on a maximum contribution of $250 from individual Portlanders only. It's been amazing for us. And we have thousands of donors now around the city with an average donation of $30, which is remarkable. But the reason that's been possible largely is through the Open and Accountable Elections Program, which was that 6-to-1 match, where if you gave $50, that $50 turned into $350 to our campaign. It makes a huge difference. And that matching period ends on Tuesday. So if you were going to donate that first $50, or you know someone who is maybe on the fence about donating, please work on getting that first $50 donated to this campaign from every Sarah supporter you know, so that we can maximize those public matching funds to this campaign before that matching period ends on Tuesday. After Tuesday, we'll still be able to take contributions, but until election day, they won't be matched. So just if you give us $50 after that, it's just $50. If you give us $50 before that, it's $350. So let's get those contributions in before the matching period ends. You can go to sarah2020.com/donate if you're able to do that. Now, no pressure, because I know that finances are a huge issue right now. So if you don't have money to contribute, please don't. I don't want you to do that. And if you have other organizations that are more important to you, if you're a Street Roots supporter or you're supporting one of the organizations that are helping our people who are really struggling at this time, by all means, put your money there. This is for those of you who have those resources and can spend that money on this effort. We appreciate that. So thank you. More news. How many of you tuned into K2 this week? I can't see a show of hands because you're at home and I'm here. but I think it was a lot of you. And I was thankful actually to be able to engage with my colleagues in this race and have a meaningful conversation about the future of Portland. We haven't been able to get out in front of voters as much as we are generally accustomed to. So it was a precious moment for us to put our ideas side by side and really talk about what we see as the future of Portland. It can be hard to get a lot of information covered in a short period of time, but I think we made clear that there are some things that differentiate this campaign from other campaigns. One, I do not think it's an effective use of police dollars to sweep homeless people down the block and then sweep them back up the block and sweep them down the block again. It's a no brainer for me. Some of my opponents don't share that. So that we made clear. I'm the only one who's put forward a pretty comprehensive Green New Deal for Portland and is thinking carefully about infrastructure investments on the other side of the COVID crisis. That was pretty clear. Differences in having a live debate, the leading candidates during the 6 o'clock news on Tuesday. And it was really informative, I think, and made clear the differences between us. But one of the things that was pretty interesting, and my team got a bit of a chuckle out of after the fact, was on Monday, the city auditor had issued a warning, I guess, to Mayor Wheeler that he was out of compliance with some campaign finance regulations. And when we went on to the debate stage, the mayor said, well, everybody's out of compliance, not just me. And I chuckled a little bit because this team, as we're going to see later, is flush when it comes to campaign finance and campaign regulation expertise. I've actually built a whole team so that we're rarely out of compliance. And if we ever do, it's inadvertently and something that we correct immediately. But we really care about the fact that campaigns are transparent, accountable, open to scrutiny, and actually in line with what the people of Portland have said they'd want when they talk about the fact that we need to get big money out of politics and make sure that candidates are open and accountable to the people. That's why the public financing program in which I'm participating is called Open and Accountable Elections. You can go to a website and see every single donor to my campaign, how much I've given. It's mapped out by part of the city, so you can see where the people live who are giving me money. And it's a really important thing to get big money out of politics. So the mayor, when we were on the K2 debate, said, oh, everybody's out of compliance. And I went on my social media and said, not so fast there. I don't know if we are or not. You better be more careful with your words, Mayor. And then, whoopsie daisy, the city auditor issued a rebuke and said, well, as a matter of fact, not every candidate is in violation of the regulations. And some candidates don't have large donors or political committees that they need to disclose. And lawn signs are exempt. So there you have it, a little bit of a rebuke. But I really think that whole everybody's doing it, so it's okay for me too, isn't a very good rationale anyway. But that was a little bit of, I guess, if you're someone who follows city hall politics closely, you would have gotten at least a little chuckle out of that, if not thought it immensely interesting, like my campaign did. So, and here's the big news of the week. And this is where we are so excited to have James Offsink joining us tonight, because not only is he a good democracy activist, he's the for the Sarah 2020 campaign, and he's one of a group of interveners slash appellants in yesterday's Supreme Court decision, which was a historic day for Oregon politics. So yesterday, the Oregon Supreme Court upheld campaign finance limits. Now, we're going to talk with James a little about what this means tonight, but so you know, Oregon is largely the wild, wild west when it comes to campaign finance regulation. There's a it's the Wild West. And I think if those of you who are interested in learning more about it, Rob Davis's series, Polluted by Money, is actually a really good one for you to go back and learn more about the context in which this is happening. But for now, I think what we're going to do is talk with James and have him explain the implications of this week's decision, tell us what happened, what does it mean for the state of Oregon, for Multnomah County, for city of Portland. But before we do that, I just want to welcome him to the live stream and have him tell us a little bit about who he is and what he cares about and why he's worked so hard to get regulations like this and honest elections and open and accountable elections in place. Thanks, James, for being here.
Thanks so much for having me on the live stream, Sarah. It's really exciting to be here. Should I just start talking about why I love democracy so much, or?
Yeah, like why do you spend so much time trying to make sure that Portland and Multnomah County and Oregon have things like honest elections and publicly financed elections and campaign finance contribution limits, like, and healthy laws? Like, why does that matter to you, and why should it matter to the people who are watching this live stream?
Yeah, I guess I started working on a number of issues, including sustainability. I spent actually 2 years of my life making a film about green building, trying to highlight some of the great work that was happening in the Pacific Northwest. This was before Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, so there wasn't really like a movie that was about sustainability. And we realized in 2006 that we couldn't be talking about green building or building it at all in the United States without looking at the rebuilding that was going on in New Orleans post-Katrina. So we kind of made the focus of the film two-part, like what was happening with the rebuilding decisions that were unfolding as we watched in New Orleans, and then juxtapose that with things that were happening, the positive things that were happening in Portland and the Pacific Northwest. And what I walked away from that whole experience learning was that on every issue that we on the side of justice care about, whether it's environmental justice and making sure that our planet is habitable in 20 years or for future generations, or if it's criminal justice, or if it is housing, all of those issues have some conglomeration of people on the wrong side of it who are paid to be there every day, lobbying for outcomes that help generate profit for their employers, but are not good for our society. And so I started to work on good government reforms, which is kind of a broad catch-all term for things that improve our democracy and make elections and our government, our elected officials, more accessible and accountable to everybody, so that people can know that they have a voice that matters in determining what happens in their community.
So Portlanders owe you a lot. I mean, when you think about the challenges that we face and the fact that we are headed into increasingly chaotic times, and we need a government that we can trust, that is accountable to the people, in which the people's voices are represented. These kinds of reforms are essential. So tell us about your role in this recent court decision. Why are you involved, and why was your name on that decision?
Yeah, we've been working on this for the last 5+ years. I mean, some people in our group have been working on it. My friend Dan Meek, our local attorney, and Jason Kafori. Some people say Dan Meek has been working on this for his entire life. So I can't claim that just because I've been working on it for a decade. There are certainly people whose shoulders I'm standing on who've been working on it for much longer. But as you mentioned, Oregon is really the Wild West. There was a terrible Supreme Court interpretation in 1997 called Kiesling versus Venata. And the decision held that that Oregon's free speech clause in our Constitution was so strong, so encompassing, that it precluded any kind of limits on campaign contributions. So this was shocking, especially at the time. I mean, it was 1997. It was definitely before I was following it. But there are 36 other states who have free speech clauses that are very similar to Oregon's, and there are 5 states that have identical free speech clauses to Oregon, and no other state had ever found that those words meant that you couldn't place reasonable limits on campaign contributions. So, fast forward over the last 23 years, and you can imagine that not having any kind of limits on campaign contributions has had a real effect on our democracy. Oregon, even though we're about in the middle as far as our population, we are the most expensive or second most expensive place to run for office per capita out of the entire country. Sometimes Alabama is more expensive than us, but other than that, Oregon is typically at the top. And we see this, for instance, in the in the last gubernatorial election with Kate Brown and Newt Buehler. Phil Knight donated $3.5 million to Newt Buehler's campaign. Those type of donations would be illegal in 45 other states. They would be illegal in Oregon if Newt Buehler had been running for Congress, because federal offices are limited, have lower campaign contribution limits, and yet they were allowed. So the importance of this decision, and so what happened this week was related to a 2015 ballot measure that we ran in Multnomah County. And the intent with the ballot measure was to revisit this issue, to assert that no, campaign contributions are extremely popular. They're important for our democracy. We need to have something where everybody, whether they can donate $5 or $500, can feel like they really have the voice that's reflected in their government. And we ran a ballot initiative that ended up passing with over 88% of Multnomah County voters' approval. And immediately the county asked a court to say, well, how does this compare, or how does this work with the 1997 decision? And a Multnomah County Circuit judge said, well, these limits are unconstitutional, and sent it to the Supreme Court. Well, we appealed it, and the Supreme Court took the unusual step of bypassing the appellate court, which kind of signaled that there was some interest in reviewing this case, that they knew that it was going to be important. And that was argued last year in 2019. And we have been waiting on the edge of our seats for a decision. And that decision came out this week, just yesterday. And it was, there was a lot of parts of the decision, but the most important part was that the Supreme Court of Oregon reversed their 1997 decision and said, no, in fact, it is allowable under the Oregon Constitution to place reasonable limits on campaign contributions. So it was a huge win.
So when you say a huge win, like how big a deal is this? Like, what does that mean, a huge win? Like, what does this mean for the landscape at the state level? What does this mean for Multnomah County? And talk to voters about what this means for City of Portland, because we're watching right now, and Mayor Wheeler is probably taking big checks as we speak. So how I mean, we can assume, right? He doesn't.
Right.
So I mean, how do we evaluate this for people who aren't quite as deep as you are in this and understand what's going on for our real lived experience?
I mean, I think the important thing for everyday Portlanders to keep in mind is that taking large checks is illegal, and it is also just the wrong thing to do. I mean, 87 plus percent of Portlanders voted to approve Measure 26-200 in 2018 that ushered in the same limits as we talked about earlier at the county. And so it's unclear if the auditor is going to enforce the limits. I mean, there's still kind of some legal questions around the edges. It is a huge deal, though, to answer your question. I mean, Oregon democracy, especially, a year from now, 2 years from now, campaigns coming up in 2022, 2024, this is going to completely change the way that campaigns operate in Oregon, and it's going to change them for the better. Instead of going to just wealthy special interests that can be relied on to cut large checks. Instead, campaigns are going to need to run the type of campaign that you're running, where they talk to hundreds and thousands of people, and they build small donor bases that are excited about the policies that they're going to bring to bear. So I know I would love to be able to give a specific statement, ultimatum to the people tuning in about what's going to happen at the city, because the mayor and a handful of other candidates are taking huge donations that are outsized. I would continue to say, those of us who have been working on this, that those donations are illegal today. They were illegal, 4 months ago, but it does still remain to be seen if we can compel the auditor and the rest of the mechanisms at the city to really enforce those limits. But we're doing everything that we can to make sure that happens. Of course, the mayor should not be taking them anyway, because the voters of Portland have spoken.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something I actually had the good fortune of getting to ask a rebuttal on this when it came to putting him on the spot about his answer in the K2 debate of how do you rationalize when 87.4% of voters have actually said that they want $500 limits. You continue to take these large contributions, and basically was his answer that those don't sway me in any way. Those people give those contributions to me, but that doesn't mean I do things for them or say things for them. And later on, someone explained it to me that it doesn't necessarily shape what you do or what you say, but often what you don't do and what you don't say, right? Or what actions you won't take, right? And so for you, what you're saying is for us to actually have this cleaner landscape is going to be a lot healthier when we're trying to pass progressive policies, right?
100%. I think that some of where it's been difficult to pass progressive policies previously is, the opposition, people who are into regressive policies, have paid lobbyists who, can hang out in City Hall all day, can make relationships with decision makers and the staff of decision makers, can closely follow, how every issue is developing. And that gives them, a huge leg up. And then, the final straw is really the ability to say, I will, cut a big check to you if you do this, or if you oppose this, whatever it is that they want. Or if you fail to act on it, I'm going to be funding an opponent. Those are the types of conversations that definitely have happened. And even the threat of them happening, they don't always need to happen explicitly. There are some cases across the country of people being caught red-handed delivering, dirty sacks of money. But for the most part, that's not how it happens. Instead, there's kind of a wink and a nod of, if you lean into these policies that we prefer, that you will be rewarded, you will be protected. And it's funny to me, I was looking at the Supreme Court decision that was released yesterday, and the first page of that is humorous to me. because of course, I really care about the Sarah campaign and what we're trying to do here. And I know that there are several other Sarah supporters in the list of interveners who really want for our democracy to be one where everyone has an equal say. And then I looked at who was on the other side of the case, and I saw the Portland Metropolitan Association of Realtors and the Oregon Associated Industries and the Portland Business Alliance. And I thought, oh, well, this is exactly the tension playing out here. The community that wants to have a healthy, thriving democracy where everyone is included, versus the people who it works just fine for right now to be able to cut big checks and get the policy outcomes that they want.
Yeah, that's kind of like we have this like good guys, bad guys narrative going on, but in some ways it's really true. We're fighting a good fight here in terms of this isn't just about the Sarah 2020 campaign. It's really about opening up this democracy so that it's the people's democracy and the people of Portland are shaping outcomes. And some candidates may see this as a burden. And I don't know, sometimes I think my campaign is so skillful and my team's so strong that we make it look effortless. But I know that we had to get more donors just to qualify for the public financing that I think the incumbent has even gotten so far. But what that does, even though that's work, that is good work that connects you to the people of Portland. You're talking to them, you're hearing what their concerns are. And as I've talked to thousands of Portlanders through this campaign and gotten them to buy into this vision, my answer when people ask me, Sarah, how will you make change happen when you're in City Hall? I have a clear mandate undergirding these progressive policies where I say it's not about me. It's about these thousands of Portlanders who've signed on, who say that they're going to be there to craft the policy, to pass the policy, to build the grassroots movement in support of the policy. So ultimately, even some of those who aren't taking such big checks but see things like these campaign finance regulations as a bit of a burden, I hope they begin to benefit in the way that I've benefited from the connection with the community, the education that gives me, the ties to good thinking and the innovation that's going on right at the street level here in Portland. It's going to be a huge asset in terms of civic innovation and our ability to make, I believe, transformative policy happen faster on the other side of this election too.
I think that's right. I think all of us in this age, myself included, are in a little bit of our own, filter bubbles. And I know that I'm hearing, from a lot of the same people who have, similar viewpoints. And when you think about that with respect to our elected officials and decision makers, it's not good. I mean, if they're hanging out with this similar sets of people, which has historically been, the wealthier side of town, the West Hills kind of parties, and people who are, employed in downtown, that doesn't reflect all Portlanders. And being required in order to earn city office in this city to go and really talk to people across the city who have all kinds of different perspectives and know that every single door that you knock on, every single house party that you're at could have that same, shaping effect on your campaign, not just the people who can cut you 4 or 5 digit checks. I think that it really matters for our democracy, and it's really going to change what the policies look like in our city.
It changes the balance of power too, because I sit down sometimes with people who are used to writing those 5-digit checks. And when I say you could write me a check for $250, but that's it, it changes the balance of power because, my next door neighbor wrote me a check for $250 too. So you two are on the same playing field, and I need you both at the table. It's not that you're not valued in Portland politics or we don't need your participation or your partnership. But what it means is your voice isn't bigger than other voices. So it really is one voice, one vote largely. And I'm so excited about that. Any final words, James, or things that people need to bear in mind with this decision, or what should we be watching for in the next week or month as we get closer to the May primary? Any thoughts for folks?
I think that this is going to continue to be in the news. The mayor has had a number of complaints about the way that he's handled his campaign, from the transparency stuff that you covered at the beginning to now these limit violations. There are other things coming as well. He's violated a number of different laws and code at different levels. So I think that this is going to continue to be an issue in the news, not just because it's something that I care about or something that campaign activists care about, but because the people of Portland really care and want to know that our elected officials are not being funded by people who have different interests than the rest of us.
Well, thank you so much for all of your hard work, and thank you for your colleagues who've been in this with you, honest elections, and even the open, accountable elections, and all the things that you're doing in good government reform. I know so much of that thinking is reflected in the good government policy that this campaign has put out, which people, if you want to look at it, go to sarah2020.com/good government. There's a suite of them. And this is going to take all of us coming together in support of these kind of reforms that say we want to be an inclusive, equitable, accessible, efficient, sustainable place. And we need every Portlander engaged in that work. We need to make sure that they feel welcome in politics. We need to make sure that their voice feels valued. It's not enough to just scream in frustration. We need your voice at the table in meaningful ways, using your experience, your understanding of your people and your place to help us make better policy so that the things that we're thinking about when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and making sure that your utility bills are reasonable and making sure that transportation systems work for you and that the affordable housing and the jobs are where you need them. This is all about getting you to the table and having space for your voice and your expertise, because it's going to be so important for us to be able to make progress. We need you here. And I appreciate everyone's work on that front, making sure that every Portlander does feel welcome, James. And I do want all of you to stay engaged in this work too, because this is just the beginning. We've got a lot to do here. We've got to rethink our form of government. We've got to rethink how we do our budgeting. We've got to rethink how we fund public safety. We've got a lot of work to do. So thanks all of you for tuning in. I'll see you on the phones, or maybe I'll see you on my bike. I've been delivering a lot of lawn signs the last couple of days. So if you've got one, don't forget to snap a picture of it. But otherwise, stay up, stay in it. I'm grateful for you. I'm looking forward to Election Day. Have a wonderful weekend. Get some rest. Take good care of each other. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.